Sentire Media.
Hello, you. You're listening to A History of Italy. Episode 173, The Roar of the Tigress. We last left off on the 30th of April 1488, with the start of the regency of Caterina Sforza for her son, Ottaviano Riario, after the assassination of her husband, Girolamo Riario. That same year, another assassination occurred in nearby Faenza, annoyingly placed right between Caterina's two cities of Forlì and Imola. The Lord of Faenza, Galeotto Manfredi, had married the daughter of the Lord of Bologna, Francesca Bentivoglio. That was the daughter, not the Lord. As often was the case, the fact that he had got married didn't mean that he gave up on his lover, Cassandra Pavoni. His new wife was not pleased at all, and quite right she was. Things escalated to the point that her husband slapped her in public. Enraged and humiliated, she took their young son, Astore, back to Bologna. Her father had been waiting for just such an opportunity and started to plot with Caterina's husband, Girolamo Riario, who was still alive at the time, obviously. It's hard to plot with somebody who's not alive. We're talking 1487. Things ended there because that boring, wishy-washy peacemaker and diplomat Lorenzo the Magnificent intervened to bring peace. Francesca returned to her husband, and it seemed that all had been forgiven. It seemed. The relationship seemed to have mended so well that, in 1488, Francesca invited her husband temptingly back into her chambers. Unfortunately for Galeotto Manfredi, his wife had in no way let bygones be bygones, and two assassins were waiting in her chamber, and that was the end of Galeotto Manfredi. He left the young Astore as his heir, with the very high risk of greedy neighbors moving in on Faenza, until Caterina sent troops to help smooth out the succession. In the very early years of her single regency, this was the only real critical situation. That meant that Caterina had plenty of time to dedicate to some of her passions, taking care of her kids to start with, then flowers, medicinal plants, beauty creams, hunting, and riding. Some of the things she would cook up in her personal lab were poisons, invisible ink, contraceptives, medieval forms of Viagra, and even, supposedly, remedies for women who wanted to become virgins again. At this point, she began a new passionate relationship with a man by the name of Giacomo Feo, brother of Tommaso, the castellan of the fortress of Ravaldino. A child would come from this relationship, Bernardino. They even got secretly married. They sort of managed to maintain the secret because anyone who spoke of the secret wedding faced jail time. That meant that everybody knew about them. Going back to the political scene, the delicate house of cards that was peace on the Italian peninsula felt the first gust of wind with the death of Lorenzo de' Medici the Magnificent in 1492. As we know, Caterina was deeply affected by the death of her hero. Her relationship with Giacomo Feo continued, to the general displeasure of many in Forlì, but also beyond. Caterina's uncle, the Shadow Duke of Milan, also did not trust Feo and his influence over his niece. Feo acted as if he were the count, managing the finances, which included paying the soldiers. He was not clever about it either. Unfortunately, he became arrogant, and the people's hate toward him increased. Tensions grew in the peninsula, as we know, when French King Charles VIII started plans for his descent to Italy to claim the throne of the Kingdom of Naples. Caterina tried to remain neutral and looked to the Florence of Piero de' Medici for protection, meanwhile preparing her own defences and increasing training for her soldiers. To make a long story short, a very long story, Caterina managed to survive the descent of Charles, with Neapolitan and French troops always on her doorstep, and she was very pleased to see the backs of both armies when they finally left. She managed to walk a very dangerous tightrope. Her family ties were to Milan, allied with the French, but as an official vassal of the papacy, she should have sided with the Neapolitans. In the end, she managed to balance that too. The passion between Caterina and Giacomo Feo continued, but so did a power struggle between the two, leading to arguments. The tigress would not accept him trying to dominate the situation. This did not go unnoticed to those around them. In 1494, Astorre Manfredi, the young lord of Faenza we spoke about at the beginning, was due to wed Caterina's daughter, Bianca Riario. The couple came to Forlì and were honoured with a procession. At a certain point, the betrothal party passed over a bridge. The young couple passed, Caterina passed, and so did her sons. Just as Giacomo Feo was about to pass, a man named Gian Antonio Ghetti stepped out in front of him. Knowing the man, Feo asked, "What are you doing here, Antonio?" To which Ghetti replied, "A good thing, my lord," and he ran him through with a spear. Caterina, at the head of the procession, hearing the commotion, spurred her horse and galloped for the safety of the fortress of Ravaldino, closely followed by her sons Ottaviano and Cesare. The two, however, did not follow their mother all the way to the fortress and veered off, sowing the seeds of suspicion in Caterina's mind. In all of this, Feo's personal guard did not move a muscle. The conspirators who had organized the assassination of Giacomo Feo had acted under the impression that Caterina would have been pleased to get rid of him, and after the deed they made for the square with shouts of "Ottaviano, Ottaviano!" and "Caterina, Caterina!" They could not have been more mistaken or paid more dearly for their misunderstanding. Caterina's reaction, even in such cruel times, was considered brutal. Dozens were rounded up, tortured, and executed. A whole family, from great-grandparents to great-grandchildren, was rounded up and thrown into prison, many not making it out. Of the dozens executed, 12 were children, the youngest just a newborn. Granted, a lot of this was probably not at Caterina's direct orders, and was left to the excess of enthusiasm of her men and subjects, but she did nothing to stop it. The 5-year-old son of the assassin, Antonio Ghetti, was beheaded. Caterina's own sons would be arrested and spend some time in the dungeons of Ravaldino before eventually being released. Forlì would not forgive the tigress her excesses. Blinded by sorrow and anger, she had lost the love and loyalty of her people. Nevertheless, things continued. The winter of 1496 was freezing, leading to famine and a salt shortage. At the same time, the present brought by Charles's French troops, i.e. syphilis, also took hold in Forlì and Imola. Caterina's firstborn son, Ottaviano, the heir to the estate, grew fat and lazy, and relations with her uncle Ludovico il Moro, now duke in his own right, soured even further. Rather than get discouraged, Caterina threw herself into the management of the state with renewed energy, for example, cracking down on tax evasion, but carefully only for lands that had passed from farmers to rich landowners. The famine of 1496 also hit Florence, and they sent a representative to Caterina to ask for help. The man sent to make the deal was a member of a cadet branch of the Medici family, Giovanni. He was young, handsome, but most of all, He was intelligent and spoke to Caterina's mind as well as her body. After being forced into the relationship with Riario, after the passion of the relationship with Giacomo Feo, Giovanni was the complete package. At 33 years of age, Caterina had 7 children and an estate to run, but she was still a Sforza. The two started up a relationship. Word soon got around, and Caterina found herself forced to publicly deny that she had secretly married Giovanni. In fact, Caterina had secretly married Giovanni de' Medici. From this union, on the 6th of April, 1498, Ludovico de' Medici was born. Let's leave him there for the moment, but we'll come back to him. This was on the background of rather complicated regional skirmishes and maneuvers. To try and summarize a bit, Caterina finally found a job for her fat and lazy firstborn son, Ottaviano, the main job of the nobility in the Middle Ages, fighting. And she got a condotta, a mercenary contract, at the service of Florence, who at the time was busy bullying poor Pisa to try and get it back. Milan and Venice, who were on Pisa's side, were not pleased. Caterina simply stated that the fighting was her son's personal job, nothing to do with the state that she was running. Venice used the excuse to encroach on Caterina's territories in Romagna, and the ever-present, ever-annoying ex-lord of Forlì, Antonio Maria Ordelaffi, with the support of Venice, was back in action. In the end, despite a very weak showing of support from her uncle, Duke of Milan, Caterina once again managed to come out intact and once again let her anger get the better of her, having her troops brutally raid and pillage the lands round Ravenna, prompting a chronicler of that city to coin for the first time the term the Tigress of Forlì. In the midst of this, Caterina's secret, not-so-secret husband, who had been out helping Ottaviano, fell ill. Now, my notes tell me he fell ill with ricotta, although I think I meant gout. Gotta and ricotta sounding similar in Italian. I'm going to go ahead and assume he didn't fall ill with a bout of soft cheese. He went to the thermal waters at Santa Maria in Bagno in late August 1498. Caterina made it there in time for him to die in her arms on the 12th of September. The next day she was back defending her estate, keeping her grief to herself. It is likely that she took on other lovers after Giovanni's death, but she would never fall in love again. She also had her family to think about. As was the tradition of noble families, the firstborn got everything, then there were the spares. The first spare was Cesare, and as was common practice, Caterina sought for him an ecclesiastical career. She sent ambassadors to Rome, who did not have a very successful time of it. So, you may be wondering why I mentioned it at all. Well, the Pope was, of course, Alexander VI, Rodrigo Borgia, father of Cesare Borgia, for whom the Pope had great plans. Caterina's ambassadors came back and reported that they had had an uneasy feeling due to the level of curiosity the Pope and his son had shown towards Caterina, the running of her state, her holdings, how they were defended, how many troops she had, how full her stores were, and so on and so forth. What did the Borgias have in mind? Caterina would have to think about that later. For now, there was a state to run, a family to sort out, and hobbies to pursue. She was now becoming quite an authority on medicinal remedies, and after her death would leave a wealth of knowledge behind her. After the troubles in Romagna, as 1498 flowed into 1499, things looked like they could calm down, perhaps if only for a while. The state was stable. Finances were more or less in order. Her sons, while being mostly useless and whiny and always broke, seemed to be heading at least in the right direction. What could possibly go wrong? Thank you very much for listening. Remember, if you'd like to get in touch, you are more than welcome to do so. hello@ahistoryofitaly.com. If you would like to become a Patreon supporter and get access to extra content, you can go to ahistoryofitaly.com to the support page and click through and support us on Patreon. Thank you very much if you decide to do so. Once again, thank you very much for listening, and until next time, arrivederci.